Welcome to the High Voltage Light Electric Vehicle channel. Today we're going to be taking the Photon motor off this bike and we're going to be switching it out for the new motor here from TOSEVEN, which is the DM02. So this is a 500 watt motor with a torque sensing bottom bracket. So it's going to be interesting to take this one off because that's something that you'll have to do if you want to send this off to get serviced or re-greased or repaired or anything like that. So we'll see how easy this is to take off, and we'll get this one on the bike and see how the two compare directly. I'm only going to stop it in the interesting parts. I have noticed the rotation on this is not quite even, in that it moves more easily there and it's more difficult at this point to push it around, and I'm not sure why that is. It might be something to do with the way this collar here holds the whole thing on, so maybe this is rubbing unevenly on this surface here, which I thought was a bearing anyway, but I'll take it off and I'll see if I can figure out why that would be. It's not much, it's kind of fractional, but I thought it was quite interesting. I'm really impressed with this bag that I got from ROGOV. All of the Velcro came off fine. There's no evidence of any damage with any of the stitching, which is great. Like on my first bag, the first time I took it off, I had some of the stitching start to rip away. So that's great. It shows that it's been really well made. So yeah, I totally recommend ROGOV if you want to get a good quality frame bag that's custom made for what is a very reasonable price as well. So with the drive side, I had to remove the crank with a crank puller, but on the non-drive side, after removing the bolt, you can actually just lift this one off, which is quite interesting. I'm not sure if that's by design to make it easier for people to take the motors off to service, or if it's just a coincidence. It might also be that I used maybe one too many of these spacers here on this side, and that there wasn't enough room to kind of really crunch it on when I was tightening up the bolt. So what I will say is that I mean, it probably doesn't matter because it's a powered motor, but twisting this here, it's not smooth to turn this. So I don't know, did I put this on too tight? It's kind of difficult to get that, but yeah, there feels resistance here, which you wouldn't feel when you're pedaling, but I can certainly feel it turning now. And like I've turned cranks before with cartridge bearings, and they're smooth as. Okay, so I've removed the axle here, and that came out really nicely with just a quick tap with a rubber mallet. I did notice though, like once I removed the lock ring, it doesn't seem like, I think there's a bearing in here, and it doesn't seem to be moving that well. Like even when I backed this off, this didn't appear to be moving great. I mean, it's not causing any I didn't notice it when I was pedaling and think, wow, this is really stiff or anything. So this part actually came out extremely easily. There is a bearing in the end here. I don't know if you can see it down there, but there is a bearing set in there, obviously, because it has a turning part inside of it. It doesn't move freely at all. Like I've cleaned the grease off and I've tried to sort of activate it manually, and it doesn't move smoothly. So I don't know if there's an issue with the construction of this particular part, but I'll do some reading and ask about and see what other people or what other people's parts like this are actually like. See, on this side, I can turn that and it's really smooth, and I can't do that on the other side. So I think maybe I got a bad bearing. So overall, getting the motor off was really easy, and apart from the issue with the bearing, which I'm not sure if it was initially, I mean, it might have come like this and I just didn't check properly. I certainly haven't noticed riding. But apart from that, everything's come apart. Everything looks great, good condition still. So I'm going to store this all carefully, ready to put it back on. At this point, I wouldn't remove any of the wiring or anything else. I would have just disconnected the battery and the main harness and the speed sensor, because obviously then when I got it back from service, I'd be putting the motor back on the same bike. But because I'm going to be putting on the DM02 over here, I'm going to take off all the electronics and everything, all the accessories, and we'll get that on. So these are the two side by side. Weight wise, there's not that much difference. The Photon is definitely fractionally lighter, and that has the chainring on, and that one doesn't either. So yeah, it's definitely a bit heavier. Size wise, maybe a little bit more compact on this, but not by too much. So I'll compare them also on the bike so you can see the difference there as well. Okay, I'll see if I can put these side by side on the video so you can see the difference. So this is the TOSEVEN DM02 on the bike, and it's sitting pretty well on the same spacer that was already there to keep it off the cable. So there we go, that's the DM02, and you can see how that's differs slightly from the Photon in the other screen. So getting this on is super simple. It just slides in from the drive side. It's held in with this lockring plate. What I have noticed though is that when this is fully in, there is, I don't know if you can see it, there is a little bit of a gap between the top of this plate and the motor, and if I use any one of the washers I've got, it's a bit too much, and it would kind of push it out of alignment, and I really need to get this one flush under here. So there aren't any shims. So, I mean, I suppose I could make a shim, but I think for now what I'm going to do is put this on tight flush, and then do the bolts tight afterwards, and see where that gets us. They also sent this weird looking contraption as well, which I believe bolts on here and then is supposed to lock in through here. But when I tried to put it in position, it just doesn't go in any way, shape or form that I think would actually be useful, and it would tilt the motor further back and lower down, I think. So I'm going to skip that out. I'm just going to put it on with this, and hopefully everything goes according to plan. I do have to use this thing to put it on as well. So yeah, it's going to be interesting. Okay, so I've put this on as hard as I did as much as I could get into it. So I personally can't tighten that anymore without hitting it with a hammer or something. So hopefully that's enough torque to hold it on. I don't like using those tools. I think there should be a socket for that, so some precision can be used. The wiring, I was able to route quite neatly between the gap between here. If I bring up, we've got here the speed sensor wire. It's enormous. Like, the speed sensor itself would reach back up to here. So effectively I've got this length of wire to somehow kind of bundle up and try and make neat somewhere. I'd rather not have to do that. So if that's something that can be thought about, I don't know why harness makers don't think about it. I mean, unless you put it on some super long tandem or something, it's not helpful, and it makes the job hard to look. It makes it hard to be neat. So we'll get the cranks and stuff on. See what kind of chain line we're going to get. So this goes on a bit like kind of the new CYC one, with kind of a collar nut to put it on, and it has splines to engage. So I'm not quite sure the reasoning behind going this way, but yeah, we'll see what it looks like. Okay, so this is the chain line in the biggest gear on the back. It's quite difficult to get an angle. So I'll shift this down to the lowest gear and see what that's like. So what I'm noticing with the shifting down to the lower gear is there is, I mean, it's hard, hopefully you can see, there is less of an angle picking out the lower gears, which I don't know, we'll see how it runs. It might be that I needed to move this across a little bit, in which case I'm going to need better spacers and things. What I have noticed though is that maybe the way to get chainline optimal is not by using spacers around the motor, but it's to have some variation or the ability to vary this part here. Because if this, I mean, there's loads of room within this to move it either way, but if this chain was moved fractionally, like say maybe 4 millimeters this way, then it would just give me the exact chain line I need, maybe only 3 millimeters. As I say, I'm going to see how it rides and go from there. I didn't particularly enjoy putting the chainring on. I found it was difficult to get it tight with this tool. I really hate using this tool. I think I've said it probably every video, but anyway, it's on as well as I can manage it. I could probably put some Loctite on it as well if it does come loose, but I want to see if it comes loose. Basically use the tools I've been given and see if everything works as intended. Okay, so I've got the crank arms now on. It does look like, if I show you this, I'm not quite sure why they put so much of an offset on this side, because this one could really do with being like a straight pedal, and on this side have the offset, although possibly even less offset, and that would give you better key factor. So I think they can afford to play about with this a little bit, unless they're worried about it striking on, you know, some really wide frame at the back. But yeah, so I think there's some work to be done on the crank arms for sure. This is like the main stuff done, really. I'm not gonna make you guys watch through me putting the wires and stuff. I'm just gonna skip now right to the finished one, and then we'll give it a look over and see if it runs. So I said I wasn't going to talk about wiring, but what the hell. So the speed sensor, a neat trick I've noticed with this is because it has, I'll show you, because it has this test menu up here, I'm able to use that with this and the magnet and figure out the optimal distance for triggering that. So I can move that to know how close I'm going to be. And based on the testing, I need to get this pretty close. So I'm going to have to adjust this with the screw point here to move this much closer in towards the magnet. So that's the sensor in there and secured, and it's a nice touch being able to verify this straight away on the screen with the test menu, because I know it's working now and I can move on to the next step. What I like less is the huge amount of wire that I've got at the bottom here, and it's the same up here as well. I've got to kind of tuck this out of the way, or I redo the wiring. And people that buy DIY bike kits in general, I don't think want to be cutting into wires. Like, these could be a lot shorter. I think the default should be shorter, and if you need to order special ones because you've got a tandem or a recumbent or something crazy like that, then, you know, have it for those people, and have the majority of stuff go out sized a lot smaller. I had to replace the bolts on this because they were too small to fit in, but I mean, the display itself is fine. The keypad, I'd rather the wire come out kind of underneath it than on top, because it just kind of protects it a little bit better. But overall, it was dead easy to install the wiring. I'm just going to get the rest of it tidied away, and then I get the battery on and we can see how it rides. So this is her all built. It went together pretty painlessly. It's really hot today. It's like 35, so we're going to go out and do a test ride, and I'll put the video up and you can see how noisy or not noisy, or what you think of the noise in general. Yeah, we'll give it a go. The only thing I had to do was I had to lift up this bag slightly off the sprocket, because I kind of sized it for with a 38T, and I think I'm getting the impression this is quite a bit bigger, but I'm not quite sure, maybe a 46. Anyway, it's going to be interesting to see how it works and what kind of speeds we get up to on the different levels. So apologies for the quality of video. It's the only one I've got that has the GPS. The stabilization isn't great. You notice though that you can't really hear the motor at all. It's mostly wind, and I was impressed with how quiet it was. It's definitely, at least at this level of power, it's on par with the Photon in terms of how noisy it is. I couldn't hear it at all really when I was riding. Did have a slight issue with the speed sensor here, but that was mostly my fault, I think. It is quite snappy to get going. I think that needs adjusting a little bit. I did also have a slight issue down this hill where it kind of got locked into continuously delivering power through the torque sensor. You can get it up to speed pretty quickly. Yeah, so right now I'm kind of slowing down because I'm trying to get it to cut off because it kept going. So I did sort that out, and off we go down the hill, and the delivery of power was pretty good. Like you can get the bike shifting really quite quickly. Unfortunately, I ran into a problem which we think is linked to the torque sensor. Anyway, there's a fix ready for it, but not in time for my ride. So unfortunately, towards the bottom of this hill, the bike entered some kind of a safe mode, and that's the end of probably the briefest test ride that I've ever done with the bike, which is a shame because it was performing really quite well. So yeah, that's it. All of a sudden at this point it started flashing with the battery, and there was nothing that I could do to reset it at all. So that's me back from the ride. Unfortunately, it wasn't anywhere near as long as I was hoping for, or with the kind of hills and terrain that I wanted to put the bike over. There was a known firmware bug with this, and I was hoping that I would not come into it and that I'd be able to get a lot more riding. Apparently it's been patched, and I just need a programming cable right now because I can't make the changes from the display, and it's entered some kind of safe mode or safety mode because it's not linking power from the battery through to the motor. Or power on and everything, but I can't get any more power. So that's it, on hold until I get a programming cable, and then we'll flash the firmware. In terms of how it performed, I was pretty happy with the torque sensor. There seems to be plenty of power. It's almost too sensitive at the minute. Like, you can very lightly touch the pedal and it will start triggering. It's even more sensitive than the Photon, so I think that needs to be dialed back a bit in the settings. There's a bit of a lurch when you first go off, but I mean, other than that, it certainly picks up the pressure you're putting in and modulates the power. It seemed to get up to a decent speed. Doesn't seem to quite have the same power as the Photon because you can channel in like 1500 watts, but on the top power mode, top power level, it certainly could shift along at a decent rate. So lots more on this. We'll do a lot more ride testing once it's up and fixed, and I'll update the comments and stuff with information on that. So sorry it wasn't longer on that. Thanks for watching the video. Thanks to all the channel members that have joined. Your contributions are really appreciated, and there'll be lots more on this motor system. And then once this one's sorted, we'll do the DM01 as well. Thanks for watching. Cheers.